Okay, we'll start recording if that's right, John. So 1 Kings chapter 17. It's interesting, isn't it, how the Lord is in things. H quoted Hudson Taylor. And I am beginning this message with a quote from Hudson Taylor as well. Hudson Taylor was a missionary who went out he got his call here in Brighton and went out to China and began what was the China Inland Mission. I think, is that right? China Inland Mission, it was, wasn't it? Yeah. And now Hudson Taylor, he was a man, from our perspective, he made huge sacrifice. You know, he faced all sorts of hardships. If you've read his story, you'd think, oh my goodness me. You know, he faced peril and danger, beaten and hunger, coldness and nakedness, all for the sake of the gospel, going into deep, dark China where there was paganism and all sorts of false ideas and everything else. His whole life dedicated to serving God at great, great risk and great cost to himself. And this is the quote that I want to begin with, that he said towards the end of his life. He was asked about, the mission that he'd done and the sacrifice that he made. And he said these words. He said, "I never made a sacrifice." That's an incredible thing. I never made a sacrifice. Now you'll remember, hopefully, those of you that were here last week will remember the theme of last week and of this week is this: great sacrifice for great joy, for the sake of great joy. And we thought about how every leader calls people to sacrifice. And the Father called the Son to sacrifice. Jesus calls us to sacrifice. If anyone would follow me, he must deny himself, pick up his cross and follow me. And as a church leader, I would call you to sacrifice. As parents, hopefully, as leaders of your children, you call them to sacrifice. You know, it's an important thing. Often, parents nowadays, it's like, well, what do you want to do with your life? And we want to help you. You know, as parents, we're to lead our children and to call them, look, make sacrifice for Jesus. And hopefully that's what we do as parents. We call our children and we demonstrate it. The Father made a sacrifice in his own Son. What a demonstration of that is. Jesus made a sacrifice. As he calls us to sacrifice, he is the great example. Great sacrifice. But the sacrifice is for great joy. But we struggle with sacrifice. Now, if you'll remember also, if you cast your mind back a few weeks, I said, we're going to have a challenging message. And first it's the challenge and then the encouragement of the joy. And we didn't even really get to the challenge. That was the week that the guy from Gideon's was here. Well, last week we had the challenge. We thought about great sacrifice for greater joy. We thought mainly about the sacrifice last week. The emphasis this week is on the joy, okay? And so it's only going to take about 3 seconds. I haven't got a lot to say, I'm afraid. No. So this week the emphasis is on the joy. But before we can think about the joy, that'll be the main chunk of what we think about. I want to help us a little bit more to think about the sacrifice. We're going to tail off of that because sometimes when we think about Hudson Taylor, how did he make all the sacrifice that he made and then say at the end of it, I never made a sacrifice? How many of us feel like we're making a sacrifice when we sacrifice a day for whatever it might be? It feels like a sacrifice, doesn't it? And we're like, oh yeah, I'm making a sacrifice. Hudson Taylor made all that. He said, I never made a sacrifice. And, he raised loads of money, gave it all away. On his 18th birthday, he realised that the scriptures tell us that one day we will give an account for our lives to God. And on realising that, do you know what he did? He went through his wardrobe and he went through all of his belongings, and anything that he wasn't actually using, he gave it away because he didn't want to give an account for something that was wasting away, a resource that God had given him. He just gave it away. Incredible man. And he said, I never made a sacrifice. Now, was he being genuine in that, or was he being a bit kind of, super spiritual? But I believe he was being genuine. But how can he say that? And how can his example help us? You know, when it comes to, I said before, we talk about money quite a lot, sacrificing money, that's the thing that often we might struggle with. And, well, here's the thing. Yeah, every believer is called to sacrifice. If you're going to follow Jesus, yeah, we thought about this last week, there's no way around it. It's not just a bit of sacrifice. We don't just sacrifice a little bit here and a little bit there. Jesus demands our whole life. And part of the problem that we have is we think, okay, he demands our whole life. You know, I want to follow Jesus, and I know it's going to involve some sacrifice. And our attitude is, you know, what can I sort of get away with? Okay, I know, okay, I've got to sacrifice that, so I'll sacrifice that. But what about, I've got to sacrifice that, but I don't have to sacrifice that, so good, I can keep that, and I've got choices to make, and wherever we get to make a choice as much as possible, we don't really want to sacrifice. It's just the way we are, because we're naturally selfish. And but God calls us all to huge sacrifice. You know, the sort of flashpoint for this at the moment in the church across the nation would be perhaps for the gay community. If a gay person wants to become a Christian and follow Jesus, they have to make a massive sacrifice for them. It feels like a huge sacrifice. And many will, you know, at that point they turn away. I'm not prepared to make that kind of sacrifice. But Jesus calls us all to make massive sacrifice. And here's the thing. When we learn how to sacrifice, even a gay person would say, I never made a sacrifice. How do you get to do that? Well, it's when you know the joy that comes from knowing God. That's when we say, I never made a sacrifice. It's like when you invest and you're saving up. Okay, you might say, yeah, I'm sacrificing this, I'm sacrificing that. But the reality is you're getting all that back, plus hopefully something more valuable to you. Whether it's a holiday or whatever. You might sacrifice a couple of Mars bars and a night out at the cinema, but you're saving, you're going to have a nice holiday somewhere. It's like, that's not really a sacrifice, is it? That's a gain. You're sacrificing hopefully rubbish in order to gain something that's really good. Well, we don't always sacrifice rubbish to gain the joy of the Lord, but we do sacrifice the lesser for the greater. And another thing just to say about it before I bring an illustration is this. Most of what God calls us to sacrifice is sin and selfishness. They're the two main things. It's like, how can we really consider that a sacrifice? Most of what he calls us to sacrifice are things that we want out of selfishness or sin. Okay? He never asks us to sacrifice that which is for his glory. Okay? Now, so how can we get to that place where we make great sacrifice? Well, it doesn't help to think about the things that we're called to sacrifice. But it's good to start, really, by remembering who God is. Okay? God, you know, when we remember that God is the great I am. The creator of the universe. He is the eternal one. You know, he existed before there is even any universe. Yeah, scientists, some of them reckon that there's now possibly a multiverse, you know, almost infinite number of other universes. I mean, I don't know if that's true, but can you imagine that? Well, if there is, God created it. That's what I do know. God is awesome. He is so, so awesome. And he is going to judge the world. And there's such a thing as an eternity with him and eternal damnation. That's true. Now, these truths, these are earth-shaking, life-shattering, eternal truths. Now, there's nothing bigger than these truths. Okay, this is awesome stuff. And when we realise that this awesome God says to us, I've given my most valuable of all possessions for you. It's like, you! It's like, is this serious? He would give something for me, and something so valuable. Like, that's unreal, isn't it? Think about it. Someone so great, so awesome. I can know him. He calls me into relationship with him. He sets his favour upon me? Me, this sinful, messed up, bent out of shape, kind of pretty hopeless case, without him at least. He does that. Like, if God is who he is, if he is who he is, and if this is his word, here's our attitude. It's like, whatever is in this, anything. I don't even need to see what's in there. Whatever it is, I'll do. You're God. How can I, for a moment, think about ignoring you? How could I, for a moment, think about, well, he says that, but I'll just do my own thing? Anything that he says. This is where we start. It's like who he is. Never mind what's in it. Doesn't matter. Because if he is who he is, it doesn't matter what is in this book. We just do as he says. We realise we belong to him. Does that make sense? When we realise he is who he is, then it's like, whoa, I can't argue with him. I can't, negotiate the terms and conditions. Who am I to try and negotiate terms with him? He says I do. Simple as that. The wonderful thing is the moment you open this book up, having started at that place, whatever you say, anything at all, if you say, Julian, I want you to run around this room with a ribbon in your hand, prancing about, Lord, if you say it, I'll do it. Simple as that, isn't it? We wouldn't want to argue with him. But he calls us to good things. When you open this book, you realise this is a wonderful God who is so completely, 100% in every way for us, that we might know eternal, infinite, glorious joy. That is his agenda for us. I always find... Now, joy, by the way, is the one thing that everyone in this world, everyone, I don't care who they are, they want joy. They want happiness. They want contentment. They want that sense of things being right. Okay? That is why people make all the decisions that they make. Every time I choose not to make a sacrifice for Jesus, it's because I think I can get greater happiness and greater joy doing something else. That's the truth. And that is true for every single man and woman. But here's another secret, okay? And this is an important one, if we can get a hold of this. That is this. If we pursue joy and happiness, we'll never really get it. But if we pursue God, happiness and joy will be a byproduct. And that takes faith and trust. And that's what we're a people about. We're about people who have faith and trust in God. It's like, never mind joy. You don't need to worry about joy. You don't need to worry about happiness. You get God. And you will have joy. But if you seek joy apart from God, or joy first, then you won't know it. It'll be futile. Here's a question for us before we get into the text as well. How it is really, both at one and the same time, it is really easy and really hard to live the Christian life without joy. Without the joy of God. It's really easy and hard at the same time to live the Christian life without the joy of the Lord in it. It's really easy in that we don't have to do anything much to live the Christian life without joy, but the Christian life without joy is on a daily basis. It's a hard slog, really hard. And at the same time, it's both really easy and really hard to live the life that God's called us to with joy. It's really easy and really hard. It's hard because there's a sacrifice to be made and all of that. But it's easy because we don't have to do anything to get it apart from just trust him. But that's the thing that's hard, isn't it? So it's both easy and hard to live the Christian life without the joy of the Lord. It's both easy and hard to live the Christian life with the joy of the Lord. In other words, God doesn't make us jump through all sorts of hoops. We haven't got to learn to do balancing acts and all this kind of stuff to know his joy. It's not out of our reach. God gives freely. I think it's probably more natural to us to live the Christian life without joy. How many of us live day by day struggling, persevering, pushing through, getting hurt and trying to forgive and all that stuff and not really knowing much joy? That's what I tend to too much of the time and too easily. One more illustration. Where's Johnny? Where is John? Oh, he's over the back there. It's good, isn't it? Johnny's recently got a job. And he, on a daily basis, is handling the readies. Okay? So if you're a little bit short, we've got a man on the inside there. Resist the temptation, that's what I was going to say. But it would be easy in some ways to be tempted to sort of have some of that money. But here's the thing that makes it easy for John, if he remembers this. As he's handling that money, and that money goes there, and that money goes there, and he's got to give that money to that person, they're paying in some money there, and that goes in that. As long as he remembers, none of this is my money, right? It's kind of easy, isn't it? Because what happens is, when he's dealing with that money, here's the thing, his heart isn't attached to that money. And you know what I mean? When you can handle big wedges of money, and if it's not yours, you can just do the right thing with it, and there's an easiness about that. You'll know what I mean, right? Do you know what I mean? Or would you find it really tempting? But it's easy when our hearts aren't attached to it, okay? So why is it that if I've got a wedge of money, suddenly it's hard to just give that away and make sacrifices? You see, when Johnny puts that money in all the right place, he's not feeling like he's making any sacrifice at all, is he? Why? Because he's not. Why? Because it doesn't belong to him. But he's been entrusted to steward that money. Now, I did think about doing this, but I just didn't have enough money this month. I did the calculation, I couldn't do it. But I did think about giving everyone, or at least couples and singles, £10 each. And saying to you, this money is given to you completely freely, so you can do whatever you want with it. But I'm asking you, you don't have to do it, but I'm asking you to use this money in the best way possible in the service of the gospel and to serve God. Okay? Now imagine I did that. Imagine I gave you all a tenner. Okay? How do you think you would spend that money? Would you treat that £10 differently to your other money? Right? Think about it. Would you? I suspect you would. And especially if I said, so the only thing, this is what I was thinking of doing. The only thing that I ask, okay, so you can do whatever you want with it, okay? I'm not going to judge you, I promise, but I would like you to use it in the best way possible for God's kingdom. All I'm asking is that you give me the receipts. That's all I'm asking. So there's some accountability there, yeah? In other words, so I can see what you did with it, and I'm not going to judge you, but it's up to you. How would you have spent that money? My guess is you'd have thought carefully, how can I honour the Lord with this money? Now look, everything that you have in reality is like that. It's no different. God has entrusted you, all that money you've got or haven't got, and all your possessions, it's exactly the same. It's not Julian that's entrusted it to you, it's God. And if you would be careful about what I have entrusted to you, why would you be any different with God's? Why would you think that, the money that Julian gave me, I've got to use that for the kingdom, and be far more reticent about spending it on ourselves, which isn't necessarily the wrong thing to do. But why would you be more reticent about that than you are the money that God has given and the possessions and everything else that God has given you? Here's the reason why. Because you don't really believe, or I don't believe, it's God's. It's mine. That's the problem. We see it as mine. So our hearts get attached to it. You see, if I gave you that £10 and you use it in whatever way you use it, do you know what? You would not feel like you're making a sacrifice, would you? Like Hudson Taylor, I never made a sacrifice. Do you see? He didn't consider it his. He made the sacrifice, as it were, the day he gave his life to the Lord. Everything. It's like, okay, from now on, Lord, that's it. I'm all yours. So let's have a look at this passage of Scripture and learn some of the nitty-gritty about how we know, how we can know, how we will know the joy of the Lord as we put our trust in him. Some time later, the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land. Then the word of the Lord came to him. Go at once to Zaraphath in the region of Sidon and stay there. I have directed a widow there to supply you with food. So he went to Zaraphath. So, here's the first way that we can know the joy of the Lord on a daily basis. Okay. Now I'm assuming, okay, with what I'm saying, that we have made that decision that my life, my everything belongs to him. For as long as we consider things ours, we're going to really struggle. Okay, but once we've let go of everything, then we can begin a glorious adventure with the Lord. So here's the first way that we will know the joy of the Lord every day. Okay, he speaks. The Lord said to Elijah, did you see that? Sometime later, the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land. Then the word of the Lord came. The word of the Lord. Listen, isn't it a joy? You'll know this when the Lord speaks to you. There's joy in that, isn't there? When you know that God is speaking to you. Here's why it's a joyful thing. One is, it's like, what? He's speaking to me. He's bothering with me. He's got a word for me. Insignificant little old me. He would bother with me. And when he speaks, it's like, wow. And there's joy just in him speaking. When we hear, we know that, God, you're speaking to me. Do you know, there's great joy in that immediately. Now, most of us will think, yeah, I agree with that, Julian, but I don't really hear God speaking to me very often. Maybe that's the case. You feel like, you know, it is great. I can remember when he spoke to me about coming to Moore Scheme all those years ago, or whatever it might be for you. And it's a great thing. What I'm saying to you is this. God speaks every single day. Jesus, I mean, he is called the Word of God. For goodness sake, if you want to clue that, he is a God. Imagine, you knew someone and they jabbered all the time, right? You might call them, I don't know, what's the word you might use for someone who doesn't stop talking? Chatterbox. Chatterbox. Oh, here comes the chatterbox. Okay? Well, here comes the Word. Why is he called the Word? Because he's always a speaking God. Jesus has always got stuff to say to us. And so why is it, if he's always a speaking God, we're not always hearing? You know, why would that be? How can I hear the voice of God speaking to me every day? That would be great. Because that's where there's going to be great joy in that. How? Well, the answer to that, I think, is in the next part of the verse that we was just listening to, okay? That we just read. So we're going to answer that first part. How do we hear him? By looking at the second part. Then the word of the Lord came to him. Go at once to Zaraphath in the region of Sidon and stay there. I have directed a widow there to supply you with food. So he went to Zaraphath. You know what it is? We hear his word when we obey. Okay? Now, he wants us to simply obey. And we obey when we trust. Now here's the problem. Often we don't trust. So we hear God speak to us. We know he's speaking to us, but we don't really trust, or we don't obey for whatever reason. Often it's because we don't believe that it's the best thing to obey him. What we see is the cost. So often that's all we see. We see the sacrifice involved in obeying him. We don't see the joy. But that's faith, isn't it? Abraham said, the Lord says, and go to a place I will show you. He hadn't even seen it. He leaves. He doesn't know where he's going. He's just trusting that this is going to be worth it. And when he gets to the land, do you know what happens? He lives the rest of his days in a tent. It's like, well, is that it? But God had something greater in store for him. And so it's in obedience. That's where we'll hear the Lord's voice if we obey. Now just think about this for a moment. What I'm saying to you is this: if you've not been hearing God speaking to you, it's not because God's not speaking, it's more likely that you've not done what he's already asked of you. I mean, just think in the quiet of your heart for a moment. Is there an area of your life that you know God's not entirely pleased with? There's something that, maybe there's someone that you should have forgiven, or there's been a lack of grace, or maybe you've not been shooting straight with your money, or you've been harbouring thoughts. There's certain habits that you've got, things that you do, and you know that God doesn't really want that in your life. Perhaps you've not been taking the responsibility as a father or a husband. Perhaps as a wife, you've not been the wife you ought to be, or the mother, or the friend, or whatever else it might be. I mean, are you aware of things already in your life where the Lord, he's been saying, I just want you to trust me and obey me on this. Here's what we do. We think, I hear him saying, but I'll do anything, Lord, for you. Speak to you. I'd love to hear your voice. And he's like spoken, and we don't really want to obey that one, right? But call me to do something else, and I'll do that. And we say, why can't I hear him speaking? The Lord said, and Elijah went. He just did it. Yeah, if you know of something in your life that's just not quite right with the Lord, or it might be something that he's calling you to, or calling you to trust him in, or something like that, and you're desperate trying to do things yourself, trying to work it yourself, relying on yourself instead, if you know of something, trust him. It might be a costly thing, and that might be why you've not done it. It might be hard or difficult, or but just trust him. God, the moment we take those steps, trusting in him, in obedience, immediately God is going to start helping us. So God is always speaking, and there's joy in that. And maybe the moment you start, if God's been speaking to you about a particular thing, like he has me, even as I was preparing this, I thought immediately, Lord, I know what it is you're saying to me. And it's something that I kind of, for years, not really taken seriously. I thought, okay, God, I've got to take you seriously on that. I've got to obey. The moment we do that, we can begin to know the joy of the Lord. Because we'll know his affirmation upon us. A clear conscience before the Lord, that sense of confidence. Well, the second thing is, so actually there's two things. God is always speaking. There's joy in hearing his voice. Secondly, there's joy in obeying him. And here's the other thing about obeying him. The moment we begin to obey him, we begin an adventure with the Lord. Who knows where that might lead? Okay, so Elijah, imagine he sort of said, leave the brook. I don't know, I don't know if God's really saying that to me. I'll just stay here. Because he could have delayed, couldn't he, and procrastinated and thought about it. Well, maybe I'm not sure if he's saying, I can't just go, I can't just do that, right? If he hadn't just gone, he would have disobeyed the Lord. Because it says, go at once to Zaraphath. And often when the Lord is speaking to us, he's saying, do it now, not tomorrow, now. Don't procrastinate, don't put it off, now. He says, go at once. So he begins a new adventure. And that adventure, so if he hadn't left when God said, what it would have meant is when he came to Zaraphath, the widow would not have been at those city gates picking up sticks, would she? Remember the story? You know the story, yeah? God says to him, there'll be a widow there, and she's going to supply you food. And as he walks to the city, he sees this widow picking up sticks. And it's like, there's the woman. She's there picking up sticks. And as a result, she ends up living, and her son lives. But if Elijah had delayed, he'd have got to the city gates too late. She wouldn't have been there. She'd have been starving with her son, probably dead, because he delayed. Missed it. Totally missed God's purpose and plan. And God calls us to great sacrifice for great joy. The joy is in hearing his voice again, regularly. In obeying, and as we obey, in whatever it is, and that scary obedience, there's a kind of recklessness in it, where we're saying, God, I'm just trusting you. And we begin an adventure with God. Now here's the third thing then. So God speaks, we're to obey. The third thing is he speaks again and we're to obey again. This isn't a one-off thing. So when he gets to Zaraphath, God must have told him, there's the widow, and spoken to him. Yeah, he takes a step of faith. Oh, can you give me some water? Like most of us, I remember once I was over Wild Park and I'd been praying and Lord, I'll do anything for you. And I just felt him say to me, okay, go and speak to that person over there. There's this person walking their dog. It's like, no, that's not God speaking to me. Surely it's not God. Oh, no, that's not it. And I didn't have the bottle to go over there. So, now, I don't know. I reckon it was God. The very thought that it might have been God, I should have just taken the risk. What's the worst that's going to happen? I'm going to look like a bit of an idiot. That's the worst. No difference there. Don't laugh. Actually, it was a joke. You can laugh. Well done, Hannah. The rest of you, you could have laughed. It was a joke. I didn't have the bottle. Okay, and so I didn't do it. Who knows where that might have led? Maybe I'd have felt like a real idiot and gone away from there, but the Lord was just looking for obedience, and maybe someone else may have come along, and there may have been a blessing in that. I don't know. Maybe the person was walking the dog praying, God, give me a sign, and then comes this guy. Just felt God was speaking to me. There's a huge risk in that, isn't there? Yeah, Elijah, would you give me some water? Just imagine going to someone in the street. Would you give me some water? It's like, how many of us would do that? It's a risk, isn't it? Surely God's not calling me to do that. Even in the small things. But Elijah, he obeyed and obeyed again. And so often we might look back and think, yeah, but I did that for God. And now it's like it didn't work out. Well, did you continue following him in faith-filled obedience? It's continuing. Every step. Always saying, Lord, now what? Now what? Now what? And being led by faith. By his word, but by faith. So, because here's the thing, right? It is a faith. We're Christians and we trust in God, right? And we don't know. We don't always get things right with God, okay? There's no doubt about that. We sometimes make mistakes. And so, when I was in that park and I thought, I'll say, Lord, I'll do anything for you. Then it comes to me, go and speak to that person over there then. It's like, yeah, that probably wasn't God. It's like, it probably was. You just praying, asking God, tell it, I'll do anything for you. This thought comes. So, how do we respond to that? Well, I responded with doubt. Doubt. Doubt is the opposite to faith. It's the complete opposite. Imagine I said, okay, well, Lord, I've just been praying. This thought's come, so I'm going to trust you. And I'm going to take this step of faith. And I'm just relying on you, God, that you're in this. And you can stop me if it's not. And that is faith, isn't it? That is faith. There's a risk there. But I prayed and felt that maybe God was saying such and such a thing. As long as the thing we think he's asking us to do isn't like evil in some way. If it's keeping with his kingdom, if it's keeping with his purposes, if it's right in line with all that he wants to do, then we should take that risk. So, God speaks, and we can know, all of us. I reckon this morning, God, some of us will know what it is that God's been kind of chipping away at us about, maybe for a long time. He doesn't shout, he doesn't make us feel terrible guilt necessarily or anything like that, but we just know an area of my life, something that I need to respond to God to. And so maybe you need to, this morning is the time to resolve, Lord, I'm gonna trust you on that. And I'm going to do it, I'm going to obey you. Take that step. And maybe you've become disillusioned because you did that once and now it doesn't seem to, God didn't deliver or whatever. Keep doing it. Keep trusting. Maybe you need to recommit. Lord, I'm going to just trust you. So there's joy in hearing him speak. There's joy in the freedom that comes with the obedience. There's joy in the adventure that God will lead us into. And then, just as an example of that, we've got this story of Elijah. He's led to this woman in Zaraphath, and Elijah calls her, it says to her, give me your bread, your oil and your flour, and make a cake for me. That's what he says. I'll just read it for you. So we read, so he went to Zaraphath, and when he came to the town gate, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and asked, would you bring me a little water in a jar so I may have a drink? It's kind of like just pushing the door, as it were. As she was going to get it, he called her, and bring me, please, a piece of bread. And she says, as surely as the Lord your God lives. She replied, I don't have any bread. That was God's confirmation for Elijah. God has said to Elijah, go to Zaraphath, you'll see a woman, there's a widow there, I've ordered her to give you food. He sees this woman picking up sticks, he's thinking, is that her? I'll ask her to give me some water. And she says yes. And he's thinking, this could be her, so it looks like it's her, and can you bring me a cake? And she says, as surely as the Lord your God lives. It's like Elijah's like, she knows that my God lives. This is the woman that God said, I have directed a woman. You see, there's confirmation in that, isn't there? Do you see that? Elijah, it's like he tests the water, gives it a bit of a push, and then as he takes that step of faith, there's an interaction, and God confirms, Elijah, this is the woman. This is the widow. And so he's able to say to her in verse 13, don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said, but first make a small loaf of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me, and then make something for yourself and your son. Well, the story goes on from there. Two amazing things happen. Number one, this woman gets converted. She puts her trust in the God that was Elijah's God. As she puts her trust, she's like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to take this. I'm going to risk everything. As she puts her trust in God, her life and the life of her son is saved. Can you imagine the joy in that for Elijah and for the woman? Great sacrifice, greater joy. The story goes on from there. We haven't got time to look at it now, but not long after that, and this is where we've got to keep going in faith, the woman's son dies. You know that? We're going to look at that another week, but he dies. It's like, her response is, man of God, why did you come here? Why? To save our lives just so that I can see my son die. It's like, what is the point in that? But then the young boy is raised to life again. It's like amazing. Imagine the joy of that. And this humble widow, we don't even know her name, right? An ordinary widow. Nothing special about this woman. She's recorded here in the Bible. It's an amazing thing. Imagine you appeared in the Bible as a person of faith. Well, God's story isn't finished yet. He's still writing it. And our lives are being written into God's story. Yeah, when we get to glory, we'll see the vistas of his awesome story unfolded, and we're in it. What kind of person are you going to be? Are you going to be the person that says, Lord, I'm going to take that risk. I'm going to trust you, Lord, and I'm going to obey. Be someone that hears him speaking to you, lives a life on adventure with him. Well, whatever that might be, wherever that might go. Let's close our eyes for a few moments.